the Town of Essex Select Board meeting for Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. Okay. Are we have that computer joined the meeting?
Was that camera up there on?
It's a swivel one. Camera, the ABC.
Oh, okay, because I thought it was that one up there.
Oh, I think it's.
So Scott, should we be seeing, it says CCTV guest and there's an icon there? Should
Should be showing up.
we're not seeing it. What about my voice? Ooh, it's louder than I expected. Yep, thank you, Sue.
How you doing, Don?
Good.
So we're not
I don't
getting
have any
the
video
picture.
right now. In the room. So just audio.
Okay, I guess also, are there any, maybe we should move on to the first agenda item. I don't know that you need to see us for the question about agenda addition or changes. Evan or Greg, are there any staff changes? Any staff? No? Board members, select board changes?
No.
Trustee changes? Anybody have any changes? See a lot of shaking heads. All right, so we'll move on to public to be heard. Public to be heard is a time for, I guess maybe can folks hear me? Can you hear me online now? Okay, all right. So public to be heard is a time for the public to bring issues before each of the boards for items that are not on the agenda. If you would like to speak to the boards, please be brief, please be civil, refrain from using inappropriate language, address your remarks to myself as the select board chair or to Andrew as the village president. Please do not attack others or town staff. If you are online, please keep your microphone muted when you haven't been recognized, and also if you are a member of the public, please leave your camera off to avoid distraction from that. So if there's anyone who would like to speak during public to be heard, you can either raise your hand here in the room, or you can raise your hand online. If you're on the phone, we will allow for a time after others have spoken to speak. And then I see one hand in the room. Please come forward to the microphone here and state your name for the record. And
Gabriel Handy. Hi, Evan. I just need like 5 minutes if I could.
go ahead, sir.
And he said brief, so hopefully 5 minutes is brief. I built the 43 unit on Park Street for the senior housing. I provided 11 parking spaces on the school side with the understanding that my overflow seniors could park there. Last winter, a sign went up saying no parking after midnight. So I didn't want to battle with it last year. Plus, I was gone for most of the winter, so I didn't want this happened this winter with my seniors. Walking extra 100 feet is taking a big risk in the winter for some people in mid 70s, 80s, fall down, get hurt, slip. So I created the parking behind the old Domino's building on 17 Park Street, but now they have to walk all around to go into my senior, was made it further. So I made the donation out of my own pocket to put those 55,000 with. I also provide parking on 3 Main Street for the last 5 years for 35, 40 cars for the village to use for free. I never asked for any money or any reduction in taxes or anything. I also bought 1 Main Street, the gas station. I donated a third of that to the village to create a park. So I'm just saying these things to let you know that I don't just take, I give more than I take. So I'm here to have the sign in front of those 11 parking spaces says no parking after midnight. What I put in is to be taken down so my seniors could enjoy using those parking spaces. They don't have to walk an extra 100 plus feet and taking a chance of falling and getting hurt. So that's what I'm in front of you for tonight. And I hope that's small requests from me from what I provide for the town and what I do.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like a village issue. I don't know if Andrew,
I could very simple. Last year, I wasn't local. I was out of town vacationing in a different country. But when I returned, my son informed me that he was contacted by the road foreman or the whoever takes care of the park for that school area, that any cars parked there after midnight, they will be gone. They'll be towed away. And when I put those spaces in there, that was not the understanding. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. Okay, well, I brought you my concern, and now it's in your hands.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Dave, I'll call you tomorrow or the next day.
Thanks, Evan. Good night.
Good night,
Good
babe.
Good night.
Andy.
Thanks for coming out. Okay, any other public to be heard? Okay, I don't see any hands in the room. I don't see any hands online, and I don't see anybody participating by phone that may need an alternate opportunity to. Oh, I just saw a hand go up, Raj. So how is the sound in the room? Are you hearing from the speakers, the PA system in the room, or are you only hearing? Okay. All right. we'll see what we can do. I don't know.
Can you shut us off unless we're gonna speak? Because we're gonna be listening. To start with. Would that help him?
Can we give me a minute to talk to Scott? Scott, what do you got?
I would suggest continue on with your meeting best you can, and as I'm fiddling with things, tell me if it gets better.
Did you hear that, Raj? Okay,
Yeah, we're
thanks.
try to resolve the issue as we go along. Okay, I don't see. Now I see Mary Post. Go ahead, Mary. This is a joint meeting. So I think I don't know, the discussion that the possibility that was posed earlier was that the discussion would come back as part of our budget discussions. I don't know, Evan, if you have any.
That sounds familiar, and I under the impression that it was likely not to be a Memorial Hall commission.
Well, the discussion was to change its mission
Mhm.
and have it work on, potentially work on programming rather than the physical building itself. And so, Mary, it sounds like we're still considering. Yep. Okay, any other comments for public to be heard? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the first business item, which is, and for 5A, B, C, and D, I am going to recuse myself because one of the candidates is a close friend of mine. And I'll recuse myself from both the interviews and the discussion later for making the appointment. And I'm going to slide a copy of the agenda over to Patrick, and he's going to run it from this side. I'll leave the room. Somebody please let me know when you're done. I'll try not to be too noisy with my ukulele.
At worst, we'll have great background noise. All right, so we will move on to item 5A, interview and potential appointment. First, I believe we have Rupesh Asher. Sir, if you'd like to come up to the seat and the microphone. At home or online, if you could just let me know if the volume improves at any point, like with a thumbs up or something, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'll advise everyone to just project, as my old theater teacher used to say. Imagine you're talking to someone in the back of the room so that those at home can pick you up. Okay, great. Mr. Act, nice to see you again, actually.
Yeah.
So you were interested in the potential appointment for the Housing Commission. We usually have an opportunity for the candidate to talk about themselves if you'd like to do introductions, and then we can open it up to the two boards if they have any questions. Procedurally, just so yourself and the other candidates are aware, typically we'll go through the interview process and then adjourn to executive session at the end of the meeting to decide on an appointment if one is coming. So sometimes we have that information at the very end of the night, but it's typically just something that you will hear about the next day. We'll give you a call and let you know. So without further ado, if you would like to take some time.
Thank you for having me here today. And my name is Rupesh Asher. I have lived in this community for about 21 years now, serving Essex Junction clients. When I was a pharmacist, got to know a lot of people here. And I have 3 kids. One is in college and 2 are in middle school. And I thought of, giving back to the community by stepping my foot into the housing committee when it opened up. So that's why I'm here. I know I can make a difference and contribute with my knowledge as part of the member.
Great. Thank you very much. Since I'm here in the room, we'll do the select board first. And we can keep an eye for Sue as well if she raises her hand. That'd be great. I apologize. I don't have a computer in front of me.
I got it.
Select board, any questions for Mr. Asher?
What do you see as the biggest housing concern here in the town?
The concern for there's a big shortage. That's what I hear most of the time, and like concern from the residents or people coming in the area, or what kind of
Either one.
yeah, the new people when they come, I hear they have really hard time finding the housing in Junction, in Chittenden County itself. So there's a big shortage, and that's the biggest concern I hear from people.
Great. Okay, I think Sue does have her hand up. Yes. Okay. Sue, go ahead, please.
Yes, definitely. For the Housing Commission, I applied for the Select Board last year, I remember. For the Housing Commission, it's a stepping stone for me again. I want to serve my community in Essex, and I love the area that I'm in right now, and making sure that with the level of expertise and knowledge that I have, I know that I can help the community. So that's why I want to serve my community and learn myself of how everything works. So
Thank you, Scott. Trustees, open the floor to you guys. Any questions for Mr. Asher?
so looking at the future, is that the question is? Uh, how do I see Essex in next 2 or 3 years? Is what you're implying as a question? On the commission, well, the purpose of what the job description was is to provide the information and see if we can work together as a team to relieve the housing crunch and get affordable housing make it happen in Essex. So if I was on the committee, I'll work with all the parties involved to see if we can help out relieve the housing crunch.
Great. Any other trustees?
Yes, Mr. Asher. This may not be a fair question, and I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, but I'll ask it of the others. Do you see, if you look at this issue, because this is an issue not just for Essex Junction and Essex Town, but it's an issue around, do you have ideas? Have you seen things that other communities are doing that you think might work here? And I know that you're not, and that may be unfair because I know you're new to the situation, so please don't feel like I'm putting pressure on you, but I'm
Oh, yeah,
wondering if you have
definitely.
some concepts.
So what other communities are doing to bring to relieve
Yes.
to best of my knowledge, I don't have the experience, I'll be honest with you,
That's fine.
of what Burlington, Milton, and other Chittenden counties are doing.
Right.
But, and my reading is not that vast as well
Sure.
of what other cities have done. But we can have some ideas of, bringing partnerships between, different kind of organizations. Either it could be non-profit organization or profit organizations,
Okay.
and see what we can do as a team
Mm-hmm.
to relieve the problems. I'm not aware of any, examples that I can give personally
That's fine.
of what can be done or what should be done. But again, when there is a will, and if we work as a partnership with other counties or other states,
Mhm.
and see what they have done and learn from them, and try to implement here, it is definitely beneficial for the community.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Andrew?
Yeah, please.
That's okay.
Anyways, my question would be, if you're not selected for this position, is there another position within, the realm of the community volunteering, maybe on Trails Committee or another board per se, that you'd be interested in?
Definitely, if there's an opportunity out there, and if I have interest in it, and like to do what I'm doing, then definitely there is no doubt that I will not step in. It's something that I want to devote my time. I have time now to the community, and yeah, definitely a trail committee will be good. I'm an outdoor person and play tennis, so anything sports related will be definitely a plus for me. Housing is dear to me, and that's why I volunteered for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Then, Mr. Asher, thank you very much for coming in today. As I said, we'll likely be in touch sometime tomorrow with the decision. But you can feel free to sit and listen to the other interviewees if you'd like, or you're all set for tonight if you'd like to head out.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right. Next, Alison Levy.
Good evening.
Hi, Alison. Good to
Hi.
see you again.
Thank you. Nice to see you all too.
So much like with Mr. Asher, if you'd like to take a few moments to introduce yourself to everyone on the board,
Sure.
and talk about your interest in the Housing Commission.
Okay. Max and I've lived here for 24 years at this point. I would tell you that we lived in East Fishkill for 7 years before that, and 2 years in Essex before that. And so even though it was only 2 years initially when our first child was born, we knew that we were not going to stay in East Fishkill, and we knew that indeed we were going to come back to Essex. So we fought hard. And when we had that opportunity, we came right to Essex because we knew this is where we wanted to live, and to raise our kids. And we did. We have 4 children who went through the school system. And we are happily involved and committed to Essex. I just retired from 17 years of teaching at Essex Middle School. It was hard to give up teaching and to give up the influence that a teacher has over children. But one of the main things that I've been excited about is that I have time now to give back to the community, working mostly with adults. But that's a change, and I'm excited about that. I have joined VIEW, the Vision for Inclusion in Essex Westford, because VIEW is doing work that I believe in, which is to make Essex equitable and welcoming for everyone who is coming here. I am volunteering for Habitat for Humanity. I have been really fortunate to have secure housing, but I know that is not a given. And so Essex Housing Commission is next on my list. As a teacher in the school system, I have seen the changing demographics. Dawn years ago when we were on the Essex Town Select Board, Essex Town School Board together. The percentage of kids who qualified for free or reduced lunch was about 7%, and it's now approaching 30. So the demographics have shifted. We know that Essex has had the biggest population increase in the state since 2010, and we have a lot of people here who are struggling to find housing. So I have had students in my classes who were homeless, some of them living in cars, and I know what that does to impact their learning. So I am looking for a way to be a part of that solution to helping us move forward.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Select Board, any questions for Alison? Yes, please go ahead.
What do you think the top 3 housing needs are for the community in the next 12 months?
I am sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to repeat that.
What do you think the top 3 housing needs are for the community in the next 12 months?
Top 3. I guess I didn't think about it like that. But I would say that in order to address the problems of affordable housing, there needs to be some concrete action and recommendations taken by the Housing Commission so that the board and the trustees have suggestions on how to move forward. I personally think that we need to move toward inclusionary zoning and think that that's a recommendation that would be helpful to get builders in partnership with us for solving the problem. I think that Essex needs to work in concert with the CCRPC to make sure that this is seen as a countywide problem and that we're all as a county working together, because it's not an Essex problem. It's, I suppose, a national problem, but it's certainly a county problem here. Additionally, I would love to see the Housing Commission guide Essex to be intentionally interconnected so that the people setting policy for education and housing and offering employment opportunities work together, so that people who work here can afford to live here, families whose children are here can afford to have access to affordable and stable housing. So I think that the focus is on increasing our long-term supply of affordable housing.
Sorry about that. We had a weird sound issue in the room.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Sue, question for Alison? Okay, great. Then I apologize also before I ran completely ramshod over Andrew and was calling on people everywhere. So, Andrew, I will hand it over for you to speak to the trustees.
Well, I guess sort of what I think there's some overlap in what I just answered, that I would hope that we would have gotten inclusionary zoning underway. I would hope that we would have come up with a system for different stakeholders within the community to be working together on the problem, meaning the educational community and the business community, as well as the select board's policy and the planning commissions. I don't have a number of units that should be developed or how that should happen. I look forward to learning more about that, but I think that and working intentionally with the CCRPC would be the 3 things that I'd like to see happen quickly.
George.
Hi, Alison.
George.
Go in. I'm going to ask the same question, and again, not to put you on the spot at all. I don't anticipate that you're just coming into this, but do you see anything? Have you seen anything that's going on in other communities that have innovative ideas that you think might work here?
I would say that the work that I've done since I went to my first housing commission meeting was to look into the zoning piece, and I know that South Burlington and Burlington and Heinsberg are involved in that. So that seems like that's something that's well established within the county. Beyond that, no.
Okay. Any hands online?
Do not see any.
Okay. Then I think we are all set. Alison, we do have a presentation after these interviews by the Housing Commission, and some of what you're speaking, I think you might want to stick around for it.
Yep. I'm planning to.
Great.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thanks so much for coming out tonight. Next, not sure if she's online, but we have Tatanisha Redida. Tatanisha, are you here?
I do not see her online.
Okay, that's unusual. She's usually at most meetings. I don't suppose on the offhand we have a contact number for her. No,
I
just
do not hand.
okay. Great. I mean, if she can arrive before we move on to the next business item, great. But if not, then it is what it is.
There's a hand up over there.
Public.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't usually take public
No, that's
comment
fine. I
on
just couldn't.
interview
I can
questions.
see the hand. I couldn't see what
Gotcha.
it was.
So then finally, Elizabeth White. Elizabeth, are you online? Maybe Annie didn't need to recuse himself.
I do not see Elizabeth online either.
Okay. Greg, I don't know if you could make the same outreach, although I now worry that since we've reached the end of the business items for the interview process, I'm hesitant to move on and then jump back with interviews later on. But, oh yeah, Greg. Okay. All right. We'll see if they can arrive, and if someone wants to get Andy, then we can continue on with the meeting. Thank you, Dan. If Andy comes back with a cello, I'm going to be really surprised. No, we didn't hear you. So just so you're aware, Tatanisha and Elizabeth White were not online.
Oh.
So we didn't do those two interviews. Greg is going to try to reach out. If they arrive later, then
Okay.
maybe we can jump back, but
Okay.
that's where we are.
All right. So then it was explained that we'll go into executive session, or there'll be an executive session later to discuss. Okay. So moving on to the next agenda item, 5E is presentation and potential action on inclusionary zoning. Who's presenting here? Yeah.
Hey, hi, thanks for having us. Just let me know if we need to move somewhere to make this work. Can we bring up the presentation? I'll start by introducing ourselves. I'm Mia Watson, and this is Mark Redman of the Essex Housing Commission. We're here today to talk about inclusionary zoning, how it works, why we think it might be a good policy for Essex, And we're here to just get some basic buy-in from the two boards to see if this is something that you think is worth pursuing in Essex, because it will require a pretty intensive research and outreach process. So this is just to get the ball rolling and see where we all stand. So let's go to the next slide. So I would like to center this discussion on Essex housing needs and why the need for more affordable housing is so urgent. So the standard of affordability is that households should pay no more than 30% of their income towards housing costs like rent, mortgage payments, and utilities. But 1 in 3 Essex residents pay more than that. And nearly half of Essex renters pay half of their nearly half of Essex renters pay more than they can afford. In total, over 1,100 Essex households pay more than half their income towards housing costs, and this puts them at extremely high risk for eviction and foreclosure and even homelessness. So it's a really pressing issue in our town. Next slide. So the reason that most households are paying too much for housing is because housing prices are so high. You can see that the hourly wage needed to afford a 2-bedroom area apartment at fair market rate is over $30. But the hourly wage earned by the average renter is barely over half that. At minimum wage, you'd need to have 2.7 full-time jobs in order to afford that 2-bedroom apartment. Next slide. So the demand in Essex is growing, and it's only likely to increase. As you probably know, Essex had the single largest increase of residents of any town in Vermont over the last decade, according to recent census results. And that demand has really been reflected in higher housing prices. The demand is really concentrated across the state in Chittenden County, so Essex is definitely feeling the effects of the job centers and the general need for housing in the county. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the cost of a home in Essex has increased by nearly 10%, far exceeding, as you can see from the slide, what... can we scroll up a little bit just to see the labels on the graph? Oh, sorry, I guess scroll down. I'm sorry. There we go. Yeah, you can see that in the first half of this year, the median home in Essex sold for almost $330,000, but the median price that's actually affordable, or the price that would be actually affordable for the median Chittenden County household, is barely $271,000. We don't have post-pandemic rent figures yet because the census data lags so much, but anecdotal evidence really suggests that vacancy rates are even lower than they were before the pandemic, and that there's a high demand for housing. According to our planning staff, the new buildings that are being constructed on Maple and Park Street are already fully leased up, which certainly speaks to the demand. And when you have such a constrained supply of housing, it tends to really put heavy pressure on prices. And we've certainly seen that over the last decade. So next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Mark.
Sure. So what is inclusionary zoning? Inclusionary zoning incentivizes private developers, all right, to sell or rent a certain percentage of their units in a new housing project below market rate. Inclusionary zoning can be voluntary, all right, but 80% of the programs nationwide and all of the ones in Vermont are mandatory for all projects above a certain threshold. Usually, if you're going to build 10 or more new homes, you have to have inclusionary zoning. Developers typically receive some incentives to partially offset their costs. This could be density bonuses, it could be reduced permitting fees, it could be priority review. And it is recommended in the recent Essex Housing Needs Assessment and Town Plan. Next slide, please.
So how does inclusionary zoning work? So every town's inclusionary zoning policy varies somewhat, but policies are really usually follow into some basic features. Most policies apply to both rentals and for homes for sale. So if a developer was creating a new subdivision, that would apply to them in most cases, although that's a choice that would be decided for this policy. Usually between 10 to 20% of units in a project are required to be inclusive. So at the sample project in the right, if it's a 30-unit apartment building, it would have, say, 6 inclusive homes. So prices for those homes must be affordable to renters earning a specified income range. Usually that's 60 to 80% for renters, or 80 to 120% of home buyers, and that would be something we would have to decide as a policy. And as you can see from the figure on the left, it really varies depending on the family size. But at 60% AMI, that would be a 2-bedroom apartment rented at a little under $1,300 for a family of 4 earning $57,500. And so as you can see, it's not really intended as a very deep subsidy. This policy really isn't used to help very low income households, households earning, households at the poverty line, for example. Those projects tend to be very difficult to pull off without, essentially vouchers from the state or the federal government to make that feasible. But of course, having these inclusive units wouldn't preclude someone who had a voucher living in there. So sometimes developers are permitted to make a payment to the housing trust fund instead of building the homes, or if inclusionary zoning is in a specific part of town, sometimes they're allowed to build in a different part of the town in addition for an extra fee. So there's some flexibility in siting, which again is a choice that would be made when we draft the ordinance. The ordinance could be town-wide or only in certain areas of Essex. So it could be the entire town, it could be in the village center, or it could be in the town center, or vice versa. That's, again, something we would have to choose. And it would be implemented as part of the zoning code for whichever areas adopted inclusionary zoning. So next slide. So the big question that people often have is, well, if you make developers abide by these rules, will they just build somewhere else and potentially put a chill on development, which we don't want because, as we've described, having a constrained housing supply really puts pressure on housing. So hypothetically, it could make the problem worse. However, most research on inclusionary zoning suggests that if it's sited in an area that has sufficient natural demand to build, it generally doesn't discourage development. And you can see from the graph that Essex actually has currently more development over the last 5 years than South Burlington and Burlington, 2 towns that have mandatory inclusionary zoning in at least one area. Burlington is citywide. South Burlington has it in their city center and is considering expanding it to other parts of the city. Heinsberg has it as well, but obviously there's less development than in Essex. Contrary to what people might expect, Essex has more development over the last 5 years, more building permits, that is, than Williston or Winooski, 2 towns that do not have inclusionary zoning. So we would have to study the circumstances that are unique to Essex very closely to make sure it's an appropriate policy. But the available data suggests that Essex has abundant demand from developers. And the idea is that if developers want to build in Essex, they want to make money in Essex, it's not unreasonable to ask them to contribute to the community by building these inclusive units. So, Mark?
Last slide, please. Okay, this shows you the process. Tonight we're at the beginning of the beginning of the beginning, okay? We just want to see if we even like the idea. If you like the idea, then we have to do research, okay? We've got to research inclusionary zoning case studies. We do all that, and then we created an inclusionary zoning plan. We develop outlined inclusionary zoning priorities. Then we do outreach where we present to the select board and trustees. Then we do a draft ordinance. Then we review the ordinance, and then you adopt it. So you can see there's a lot of stages before we actually get to this. So what we're here tonight is to see, is this an idea? We don't want to do all this work and then go back to step 4 and find out you don't like the idea, And, so that's why we're here. Go ahead. You go ahead. Go ahead.
And as you can see, in step 3, we would present a plan before actually drafting an ordinance. So some of the things where I described, like where would we put inclusionary zoning policies in place and what income levels, we would present that as options and get the select board's buy-in and trustees buy-in again before going to the effort of drafting an ordinance. And drafting an ordinance would probably require a consultant. That's what other towns who have done it have done, just because it can be difficult to write an inclusionary zoning policy effectively so that it sits well within other zoning laws and doesn't have unintended consequences. So tonight, we're not asking for, yes, let's do inclusionary zoning. We're saying, yes, let's embark on the process of inclusionary zoning and start to do the outreach and the planning work that's going to be necessary to write a good policy. And we on the Housing Commission really think that this is a great time. Like I said, the demand to build in Essex is there. And the urgency is there. When you start seeing runaway prices in rents and homes, that's when you start seeing people priced out of a community. And that usually happens to lower income people who are more likely to be people of color. So Essex's long-term future and vibrancy are really at stake here. Inclusionary zoning is really one of the few municipal level policy levers that's been really shown to have measurable impacts on housing affordability.
And we've talked, you know, my son's 18. Mrs. Levy was one of his teachers. I'd like him in a couple of years after college at least have the opportunity to live in Essex, you know, to rent a place or maybe even buy a place in Essex. And I think if we let the forces of supply and demand go as they are now, that's going to be out of reach for him and for many of our children and grandchildren. We'd like to have our children and grandchildren at least the opportunity to live in Essex because it is a wonderful place to be. So this is one way that we can at least make strides towards ensuring that. So that's what we're here for, and we would love your questions.
All right. Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Mark. Go ahead, Dan.
I guess there's a couple questions, but one, this is a great idea. Just trying to look at it from the aspect of how this is kind of a dynamic situation. It changes as employment, and you're talking about the income levels and your children being able to afford to live here. One aspect of it, obviously, or major aspect of this, is the wages that are being earned here. So if there are jobs that pay wages that can afford to buy properties within the community, isn't that one aspect? One way to look at solving a problem is to look at why can't people afford it? Is it because they don't have a job that pays affordable wages, or are they what's the root cause of this? I mean, going back 100 years ago, I mean, people came here without much and somehow managed to develop this community to what it is today. And obviously, IBM coming here in the 50s was a big push, or big part of that.
Right. I mean, I think it's both. I think, right, we need to see wages go up. We're seeing wages go up, but we also need to see affordable housing. So there's got to be some crossover.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. Wages have stagnated over the last decades relative to other costs. That's obviously a complicated economic issue. I think the housing one is more obvious. We're building a lot less. I think we were building about twice as many homes in the 1980s than we were today. There's a lot of different reasons. Zoning has gotten more complicated. I know that's something that the planning commissions are actively looking into, but over time, it has gotten more complicated to build a home, and that definitely results in higher prices. So that's one factor. Currently, material costs are really high, much higher than they were in decades. And also our construction labor market is not as strong. I mean, you could trace that back to our education system, which is another thorny issue. So I think most experts who have studied housing have definitely pointed to the fact that the housing supply, for the reasons I described, is not keeping pace with the demand. And settlement patterns are changing. You know, Chittenden County back in the day didn't account for such a large portion of Vermont's population, but now it's where the job centers are and where the demand is.
Just to follow up on along that line, there's a big push for density within the state of Vermont as opposed to sprawl. And with density comes larger buildings. I mean, people have been reluctant to see 4 or 5 story buildings going up, but you know, basic physics, you got an area, either you build out or you build up. So somewhere there's got to be give and take here, and I just curious on your opinions on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally fairly pro density. When I see a lot of what is going up at for instance, Five Corners, a lot of what was removed was like warehouses and homes that was in pretty poor condition. I think you can make development policies so that it's smart, so that you're building attractive buildings that serve the community well. I don't think it has to be, necessarily, like, I think it can bring a lot of positive changes as well. It can support local businesses by bringing more residents. And I think it really can support environmental conservation. If we build more densely into small communities, not huge metropolises, but small, dense communities, we can save our forest areas from suburban sprawl, and we can make it much more efficient to offer sustainable transportation. Right now, we've talked about ways that we can get the Chittenden County transportation systems to serve areas better, and they say, like, well, if there's more demand, we'll build more transportation. So all of these systems work really together, and I think you always have to consider the negative downsides, but housing brings so many positives with it as well.
I see Sue Cook's hand up was up next. Go ahead, Sue. Yeah, so we've spoken to South Burlington. I think we'd like to do it again. It's such a big issue. We've kind of only had surface level discussions, but we have spoken to them, and I've read a lot of I haven't spoken to Burlington, but they published a lot of materials because they did a big review of their inclusionary zoning policy. They've had theirs for a very long time. So they have kind of re-tinkered with it. I think one of the big things is you have to be really careful how you craft a policy so that, to put it bluntly, developers can't get around it. There's all sorts of ways that you can, if you're not careful, people can basically not fulfill their ends of it. Like, for instance, making sure that inclusionary zoning units are the same quality and the same types and the same unit composition as the other units in a building. So there's one example where Burlington over the years has gotten a little bit more strict in saying, okay, this is what the quality of the units has to be. South Burlington is at least fairly demographically similar to Essex and has a similar level of development. So we've taken a look at their policy, and I could see using theirs as at least a starting point. Not that we would model ours exactly, but essentially saying, okay, what do they have and what are things we'd like to change?
Yeah, I learned a lot from South Burlington. We can learn a lot.
Mhm.
I was part of the research on that, and they have it nailed down, and she said the developers want to develop. They want to build. There's building to be done. But she said, if you're left to just supply and demand, you're not going to get affordable housing.
No.
So you need some form of government intervention in order to provide affordable housing. And then how you do it from there's a million different ways to go. But we can learn a lot from South Burlington, I think.
Yep, absolutely. That's in our roadmap. It's I think it's one of the first things we'll do to understand. Obviously it's just one perspective, but what they think they can do. We don't want to make it, as we said, too burdensome for them to develop at all. So we'll have to get ask for their honest opinions on what they think they can make work in terms of requirements. So I'm very interested in knowing, what's the deepest level of affordability that a project can support. Let's look at some budgets that they have and see what rents would be required to make a project feasible. We definitely want to be fair to everyone involved in the process.
Thank you.
Okay, I saw Andrew Brown next.
That's true, right, Mia?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
what we'd plan to do. Like I said, nothing has been decided yet, but South Burlington, and I believe Heinsberg all have the policy for both rental and home ownership, and usually it's the same percentage. So say 10%, no matter if you're building homes for sale or homes for rent. Usually the compliance process is a little bit more difficult for home ownership because you have to plan, what's going to happen when someone sells this house in 20 years versus when someone moves out of this apartment in 2 years or 3 years. That's something that's been done successfully. I think a lot of communities have leaned towards Champlain Housing Trust and other nonprofits to help them manage it since they do have experience. So we'll definitely be talking to them and other nonprofits to see if there's a way for us to make the process easier. But I agree. I think we don't want to leave homeowners out of that unless there's, I think that's the plan.
George, saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I first of all don't know if you are aware that there are 50 units of affordable housing going into Essex Junction, going to be starting sometime next year. BlackRock purchased most of the property where the Lincoln Inn is and where the triangle. I don't know if you're aware of this. Are you aware of that?
Keep going a little bit.
I don't know if I can put you. The other thing I just want to run through a few things. Listen, because I've worked pretty extensively with a lot of the developers who put in the big buildings in Essex Junction, and I haven't met one, and I don't mean to burst any balloons, but I haven't met any that think density bonuses tend not to be an incentive. What we've found has been great incentives are two things. We do tax stabilization, property tax stabilization, which I would strongly recommend the town do. We do it in the village, so that when they increase the value of their property, they remain with their old property value for a period of years, and then it's slowly integrated in. That's worked really well. And the other thing that has worked really, really well that developers love is the Vermont Neighborhood Program, which we have in the village, which excludes them from Act 250 review. And it's not that you don't all love Act 250, but when you're looking at a part of the world that's already been developed for 100 years, it's not clear why it needs to go through Act 250 review. And as you know, that's just double jeopardy for developers. It delays their projects can delay it for up to a year. It dramatically increases their costs, their upfront costs. So I would just recommend that you look at some of the things that we have done in the village to try to work with the developers. What are the things that they like? What are the things that they're willing to compromise on? Because what I've seen is a lot of the things that we think tend to work from the governmental point of view, they go, big deal. But the stuff that they want, usually you can find that common ground. But those are the two things that we found have been very successful in Essex Junction.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. I will say that I think there's only so far incentives can go. That's why voluntary inclusionary zoning policies are not common. I think usually because they don't tend to work very well.
Right.
I think we need to both balance how can we help developers comply with this, but also how can we make developers comply with this? This is a business, and this is a business that's possible because of all the assets of the village and the town. I think it's fair and reasonable that developers shoulder some of the burdens that the community is facing, as long as we do it fairly and try to figure out, what's the most we can do to help the developers make this process easier.
I think you're on track there. I think that's the thing. I think working with the developers and looking at them as partners in this is really the best way to go. When that relationship becomes adversarial, then a lot of stuff doesn't get done. So, yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll look into both of those things.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Tracy.
Yeah, quick question. Well, a question and then a question/comment. But I noticed in your presentation that you talked about policies and ordinances a lot. I just want to verify that the ultimate goal would be to codify these regulations in the zoning standards and not just have a policy or an ordinance that would govern this.
Yes, I'm a little out of my depth as not a planner. I usually hear them described as ordinances, but I've confirmed with staff that yes, it would be written into the existing zoning code. So yes, I'm probably playing a little fast and loose, but it's absolutely part of the zoning code.
Okay. And sort of to George's point, I was actually on the Planning Commission in South Burlington when the inclusionary zoning regs were developed and approved. And one thing that we did was we, regularly invited developers in to talk about, what quote unquote carrot would you like? You know, what incentives would work best for you? In which areas, what type of housing, things of that sort. I don't think that those conversations and the collaboration can be understated.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Got it.
Okay, Raj.
Great. That. Said, what's your time frame, do you think, for the first steps? Anxious, everyone else, I think, anxious to see some moving forward. This looks like a great deal of work to me. I'm asking with appreciation, but I'm curious what the housing commission feels like. Turnaround on seeing sort of a draft. The, somewhere between the creative and outreach phase, I guess.
I don't know.
We've talked about this a lot. I mean, sorry. Yeah, I think we could get this done big picture in a year. I don't know if that's way too ambitious or not. I think there's a couple factors. One is just getting on the Select Board and Board of Trustees agenda. Obviously, a lot of big issues are on your plate. I think this work can continue regardless of what else is going on, just because there's a tremendous amount of research and because it's part of each municipality's zoning code. So it belongs to basically the geographical area, and I think we can continue no matter what happens. That said, we do want the board's buy-in, and it depends on getting on their schedule, of course. At the same time, I don't think we have to do this from scratch just because we do have several Vermont-specific policies that I think we can essentially take South Burlington's, start redlining, seeing, you know, okay, we like the way this is phrased, but not this, and we'll grab something from Burlington. So I think a year is reasonable. I'd love to complete our initial outreach, you know, meeting with developers, talking more closely with staff and the planning commissions within the next 3 months. And again, I'm hoping that's not wildly optimistic, but that's kind of how I see this happening.
Great. The make this work. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's see. I don't see any other hands, so I guess I will go ahead and jump in. We had Charlie Baker from the CCRPC here last night at the select board meeting, and I understand he spoke to the trustees last week in their meeting. And one of the things he talked about is the missing middle. There was also a discussion about the lack of homes for people to downsize into. You know, we talk when cars drive down the road with empty seats, but we don't talk about houses with empty bedrooms. And so there's a lot of housing capacity that's not occupied. That, you know, is that part of the targeting here to try to free up, you know, available housing that's not actually being used to take some pressure off of, or is that completely outside of, you know?
We haven't really talked about that.
I
have
mean,
we?
I think it's linked. So I think this is missing middle housing. I mean, I think we're talking about affordable and inclusive housing, but a lot of this is targeted at people who are earning, you know, close to middle incomes or just below for our community. So I think in a lot of ways, these are the people who will live in these homes are, you know, already in our community. They're just paying way too much for housing. And these are people who have, you know, decent jobs, but the housing prices are so expensive, they really can't afford what's on the market. I think the downsizing is a more complicated issue just because it's hard to bring new stock online that really makes sense economically. So developers tend to build at the high ranges of, you know, basically for the luxury market because that's what they can afford, or that's what they can make a profit on. Just because, you know, the incentives that when we added a lot of our housing stock in like the 1950s and 60s and heavy government investment are not there now. So I think it's hard to say that would help. I think it's basically saying, you know, let's take what building is happening and make sure that a chunk is reserved for people earning middle income or slightly below. That's how I kind of see that working.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, because it's a hard sell for somebody who's in a 4-bedroom house and they are essentially trading it for a 2-bedroom condo, right? It's the
Right.
same cost.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. And I think we'd have to look to other policies like, making development easier, and potentially lowering the costs of development so developers are more incentivized to provide, more entry level or downsizing homes. But it's a really tricky puzzle, and housing experts have not solved this one.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other?
Well,
Board
just one quick
members,
thing
go
along,
ahead, Dave.
along the lines of what Andy's talking about. I know one thing to address, it's only temporary, but accessory apartments in units where maybe somebody that had a family, maybe one spouse, one partner passed on, they have this large home, they rent out a space or what have you. Also, possibly maybe another thing to look at would be rezoning instead of single family to multiple, family multi. So that could change the use or the area so that it could be designed, to allow for multiple units as opposed to single family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the planning commission. So the planning commissions are currently reviewing the zoning code. So I think they are hoping for more density in those. In terms of accessory dwelling units, they're required by law. You can't ban them. And I know both the village and the town planners have done what they can to kind of tweak the code to make it more welcoming. Our housing commission will also be bringing proposals for a housing trust fund to you in a couple weeks. And that's something where I could, I can't speak for them yet. I don't think they've gotten that far, but that's something where you could potentially invest in smaller projects like that through the housing trust fund. Yeah.
Okay, Sue, is your hand up again, or is that leftover, or am I seeing? Well, no, we're not going to the public quite yet. I think I'm having the same problem I was having last night, where your hand was still up even though you took it down. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Any other board questions before we open to public? All right. So this may be a mistake, but I see Mary Post's hand. Mary, is your hand up, or am I seeing a mirage again? Oh, it's gone again. It's gone. Okay. As soon as I say it, it disappeared. Okay. Patty Davis. Yes, we can. Thank you, Patty.
Thanks. Yeah, these units would definitely be. It's the responsibility of the property owner to maintain the income requirements. So they're responsible for certifying to the town that they are occupied by the people whose incomes are required by the ordinance. Usually, that's something the developers are pretty familiar with, just because other towns in the area have it. So I don't see that being a challenge. Essex doesn't have that many short-term rentals. It's just not compared to other areas of the state that are closer to ski resorts and stuff. So I don't see that being a huge issue, but it's definitely something to look at to make sure that the affordability requirements are written carefully to make sure that the homes go to people who are entitled to them. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Patty. I don't see any other hands up. Any hands in the room? Nope. Okay, so you're looking to us for a thumbs up to continue with this effort. Is that
Correct.
I think
Okay, good
on the
thumbs up.
select board side, it sounds like we're seeing a bunch of thumbs up. Don, you okay with it? I did. Yeah. Yep. Sue's got a thumbs up. And I see trustee thumbs up.
2 thumbs up. There you go.
Sure.
Wonderful.
Yep.
And like we said, we'll definitely have more opportunities for buy-in as we
Yeah.
clarify the criteria, but I think this is a great place to start with. And we'll follow up with what we've learned from our research and what we think are the specific policies that will make inclusionary zoning work in Essex.
Yeah, this is great. Please feel free to come back whenever you. This is a great to showcase what the work you're doing, and it's important work.
Great.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having
the
us.
time tonight and the
Thank
support. Thank
Thank
you.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. And let's see. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is 5S. Discussion and potential action on tentative agreements about shared services between Town of Essex and the independent City of Essex Junction. There are some documents that were provided yesterday that are a combination of select board comments and trustee comments. Those specific documents were not the same ones that are included in the packet that went out for this meeting. I believe what's in the packet for this meeting was the most recent trustee edits, and it did not include the most recent select board edits. So I guess the question is whether we want to review those here, given that the public has not had the opportunity to review what we're going to be talking about. Does anybody have any thoughts on that from the boards? Should we go ahead and, there are a couple of big issues that some of them highlight. Go ahead, Tracy.
You know me, my preference is it needs to be in the agenda. The public needs to see it in order to give, some input on what the substance actually is. I'll be very honest, by the time I got home at 11:15 last night, I was out of the office yesterday. I was playing catch up. I started looking through the document at 4:45 this evening. So I haven't even had time to digest that consolidated document.
Okay, Sue, I see your hand up too. Pat, did you have your hand up?
I was actually going to say something similar. I was at work most of the day, and I pulled out my computer and it stopped working. So I didn't even have access to the documents after 4 p.m. today.
All right, so Andrew, I see your hand up. You've heard comments from the select board. We're reluctant to move forward with documents that haven't been made available to the public, or were not really available to members of the select board either. No, I think the two sets of documents came out kind of in parallel. Unfortunately, the one the documents that Brad put together yesterday combined the two edits. They were the documents that were in the yeah, there's an interesting sequence of events, right? There's a set of 9 documents that are in the packet. We got 6 more on Sunday afternoon, and then we got the collection of how many last night? Five last night, right? So there's 20 documents that reflect changes from both directions. Not all of them are consistent, and the select board is saying that they'd like the opportunity to take some time to review those to verify that we have consistency, the correct updates are all in there, that we understand, or that what's been provided truly reflects our intent.
I guess for me, where I come from is where my thought process is. Select board, I'm assuming you know what you responded to. So the ones, the documents that have your edits, you well versed in, and those are the ones that, from Trustees' perspective, you would have needed to review to be at the same place you're in. Similarly, we should, as Trustees, understand our own edits to the documents. So if what you received is a common late, the combination of the two, that sounds like something that is a nice service and appreciative that has been done.
Hmm.
Frankly, should be information that our boards, that in all honesty, select board edits, I think, were done before the trustees edits. So they be more relevant to your mind. But I had again, had the series of events wrong.
It's also a question of whether the public has had access to those documents. You know, and yeah, timing is a difficult thing. With when the packets have a deadline of going out on Friday and documents show up over the weekend or later, then yeah, it's always problematic. And we really want to make sure that we have full public engagement on what we're doing, and we're reluctant to go forward with reviewing documents that the public has not had the opportunity to review.
I was curious is what the fun is going through the document that does update edits, looking at edits, and having conversation, having kind of a conversation about that, really know as subsequent at our next meeting, maybe there's public input that from you otherwise. But that, in my mind, helps move the process forward, because frankly, if we're not able to put that in documents, really nice.
So Sue, you got your hand up?
Being clear, like I'm not understanding. So, what is in this document new? There edits that the select board has already seen and approved of in previous meetings, ours that our edits were provided package now. I guess I'm not understanding what is new that those consolidated.
So Andrew, the way our edits are proceeding is we sit with our legal counsel. Our legal counsel takes notes on our comments and then chooses what our legal counsel believes to be appropriate language to put in there. So we have not necessarily seen the actual edit. We understand, yes, the intent, but we may or may we likely have not necessarily seen the language that our legal counsel chose to put on the paper subsequent to our meeting where we discussed it. Raj? Yeah, I was floating the idea of working on a couple of them at a time rather than trying to do, 20 documents at once. Yeah. Thanks, Raj. Tracy?
So,
Tracy?
just to expand a little bit, this weekend I had 3 different copies, all track changed with different track changes. I looked at all of them. I tried to figure out which was ours, which was yours, which was the response to ours. And finally, I just said, you know what, I can't. I have not had the time to look at that consolidated document. And Raj, as you just said, like, give the public a week to digest it, do your research. I haven't even had the opportunity to do that as a select board member. So I don't feel comfortable hearing a response and then immediately having to give a response this evening and have an informed conversation about what's in that document at the drop of a hat. So that's my where I'm coming from with my concern.
Sue, go ahead.
Can I make a comment? Whoops.
I saw Raj's hand was up.
Okay.
Oh, okay, he's waving it off. Go ahead, go ahead.
I just commented to Dan, it sort of reminds me that when you go into the fast food restaurant in the store, you don't get waited on, but the people the people online get served first. So I'm going to jump in here.
My apologies.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
try to
We're
keep
just a
track of whose hand is first.
board joke. I think that I think speaking for myself as a trustee, I think if the select board is not comfortable discussing these tonight, I think for the sake of harmony and unity and good relations, I think we should not discuss this tonight. Although I will say, can I make one snide comment? Sometimes when 2 elected boards know that they're going to be doing something where a lot of documents get exchanged and lawyers are involved, they appoint subcommittees. Just kidding.
Oh, George.
I thought it was funny, George. but
Okay.
I have a bad sense of humor, so take with that what you will.
That was good.
Sue, did you have another comment? Yeah, what's the harm in delaying a week to look at these documents? Go ahead, Andrew. So I think the risk is that I mean, that yes, well, no, Sue, the target was, I think, much earlier than that. We were asked to have all these resolved before the trustees warned their vote. We insisted on taking our time and making sure we get things, we don't miss anything, or so we're working to a schedule that we feel works for us. And in this scenario, I think that if we look at these documents tonight, we'll be looking at them with the same amount of detail next week, and we'll be repeating the meeting. So I think it's I don't see the select board being convinced that it's appropriate to review these documents tonight. I do see Brad Luck's hand up. Oh, sorry, Pat's hand. Sorry.
No, it's cool. Cool. I mean, I hear what everyone's saying, and I think that we're going to come down on not reviewing these tonight, which is fine. I haven't seen them. I'm typically willing to go through and do the documents, as they come, but I agree that if the rest of us aren't comfortable, so I do want to just add one thing about the timeline question, is that I appreciate this trustees being understanding as well, the delays, the deliberation, how we process and go through these with our lawyer, it's obviously, as you guys know, a very time consuming process for us. So though I, feel that we aren't ready tonight just because of the document timing, we appreciate that you guys are helping, kind of roll on this when the accelerated timeline was, tossed to the wayside quite a while ago.
Appreciate that, Bill.
Yeah, especially since, the trustees do oversee a part of Essex, and that's nearly half of our constituency as well. So they're asking for this in a timely manner, in a timely fashion. I feel we have to do our best to provide for all of our citizens.
Brad, go ahead. Do you want to consider reviewing the documents that didn't get subsequent changes in the middle or over the weekend. It wasn't clear to me which ones to look at, so I have not necessarily looked through them very.
The stormwater one didn't come in the new packet though, Brad.
No, it didn't. That's what he's saying. It was in the
In the old,
in the
in this
packet that went out
tonight's.
warning this meeting. And in that, for that one though, Brad, what the way the select board has been handling these documents is if there's a new document that we've never reviewed, the select board would review them in executive session to have our own discussion before having a public discussion about them. And so we haven't we didn't do that yesterday. We had and so we haven't had our own discussion about those documents because of the confusion of which documents we should be looking at.
So
And we and Bill and our legal counsel wasn't available last night, so we didn't have that discussion. Right. Dan, go ahead.
well, I've heard, the same thing battered around here a bunch of times. So it's obvious that we're not going to move forward with this. And I would propose that we move forward with what we have left here to do tonight.
Okay, so move on to the
rather
next
than just
agenda
beat this
item.
around over and over again.
But can I ask a clarifying question?
Go ahead, Tracy.
May I ask a clarifying question of Brad?
Sure.
Um,
Oh, if he's okay with it.
Brad, did you indicate that the police services agreement hasn't been changed since the last time we discussed it? Okay, because one thing I am noticing is that the equity and inclusion group, and Raj and Patrick, you had a good back and forth on this, and you agreed that the reasonable representation language would remain, but in the version that's in the packet, that's crossed off and it still has the proportionate to the total
Okay.
population in there. So that's, I'm confused on
So Brad, it's
which
not.
good version
yeah.
is the good version.
Go ahead, Greg. I see you got your hand up. Can you- Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, Andrew, we're proposing that we move on to the next agenda item. You okay with that? You may not be happy, but yeah. All right. Okay, next agenda item is discussion of personnel. We'll go into executive session to have that discussion. And then after that is the reading file. There's no consent agenda on the here. So any board member comments associated with the reading file or any other comments on any topic? Not hearing any, so it's, yep. Yep. Okay. Yeah, we can talk about that, Andrew. That's a good suggestion. Any other board member comments? Okay, so I guess there's two potential executive sessions. Is the intent for I wasn't here for the interviews for the Housing Commission. Is the intent to go forward based on the two that interviewed, or do we want to try to reach out to others? Or I don't know what if there was a decision or thoughts on that.
There was no decision, but it is awfully odd that we've had two people, one that we know very well, not communicate. So we'd like to find out if something happened with our communication to them. So I don't know if you're ready to make a decision, but we would, at least from a staff perspective, because we've had a change in staffing this week, something may have been amiss. I don't know, but we have no way of contacting either of them to right now tonight to find out if it was on our end. I leave that up to all of you.
I think you're right on, Evan. I mean, if the two individuals weren't here because they didn't receive notice that they were supposed to be here, it would seem profoundly unfair to make a decision, that they were excluded from the meeting, from the interview process because it was our fault. That doesn't seem right. So I would agree with you. Just my opinion.
I agree.
But I know how I would feel.
Yeah, I concur.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods, thumbs up from Andrew. Okay, so we will not go into executive session, and if you were lurking about waiting to hear if there's a decision tonight, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
We want to make sure that we do our due diligence and interview all of the candidates who've expressed interest. Okay, given that, then we only have the one executive session on a discussion of personnel. Does anybody have the motion up for the select board?
I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the employment of public employees in accordance with 1 VSA section 313A3 to include the select board, select board trustees, village attorney, town manager, deputy manager.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Don. Thank you, Pat. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0 for the select board.
I'll make the same motion on behalf of the trustees.
Second.
You just did.
I have it right. Aye.
Okay, so I guess the question, I don't think we anticipate coming back to public session. We would just adjourn. We would do Andrew, do you think we're going to need to come back? Yeah, no. Okay. All right, so we will adjourn those that are here in person. We'll go upstairs, then we'll start the other meeting. And
10. I'm slow.
this meeting, we won't come back to the live meeting. We'll just adjourn from. So thank you for those who attended this evening, and have a good night.